Everybody ready? Okay, welcome to Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting. It's August 26, 2021. Please join me in a salute to the flag of our nation. Right behind us. Ready, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Connolly.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Here.
Member Byram.
Here.
Board Member Daly.
Here.
Board Member Riston.
Okay, is he coming, do you know? Okay, all right. Next up is on our consent calendar, I believe all we have, if I could get my thing to move here. Yeah, the only thing we have is the minutes. Does anyone want to talk about the minutes or have anything to say? Any public comment on our minutes? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
There we go. Now, when I say make a motion, let's do it, man. Let's get out of here. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, regular business. The GSA board will review and consider public comments and the Wyandotte Creek GSA Stakeholder Advisory Committee's recommendation on a draft project management actions chapter of the GSP.
Great. Thank you, Chair Conley, members of the board. Kelly Peterson here with the Department of Water and Resource Conservation, and also member of your management committee. Today we'll be talking about the projects and management actions for the GSP for the subbasin. And overall, we'll be looking at the planned projects management actions, an overview of the public comments received so far today, and recommendations from your Water Advisory Committee. And then these are the specific actions we'll be requesting your recommendation on. So specifically, which ones that we'd like to be included in this draft that's going to be released next month. And then also the ranking of the proposed planned projects, whether or not potential projects should be ranked, and then any other changes to any other components of the chapter that you see fit. So just a real quick overview of PMAs to get us situated again. Really what we're doing here is putting together a sustainability plan on how we're going to manage groundwater for the next, over the next 20 years, how we're going to manage that sustainably. And so what you can see here is in this figure here, we've got out till 2042 to reach that sustainability goal. However, we're setting objectives, which is where we want to be, and we're also setting minimal thresholds, which is where we do not want to be. And all along the way, including our annual reports and then our 5-year check-ins and those updates, we'll be making sure that we're hitting what we're calling interim milestones, which are the conditions that we want to see our subbasin in. And so as we move forward, if we are not meeting those, we have a slew of tools basically on our bookshelf to pull off and say, okay, how can we implement these to get us where we need to be in terms of groundwater levels, groundwater quality, all of those sustainability indicators that we've been talking about all along the way. And so this is on the left is just a list of what's required in the actual GSP for PMAs. So a couple quick notes on PMAs. They don't have to be implemented right when the GSP is adopted, and this will also require funding. So we do have that 20-year implementation horizon, and we really want to get at where we're at with these 5-year reports to help us understand how these PMAs are helping us attain those goals. Adopted PMAs could and should include a range of contingencies in case we aren't quite meeting those goals. And another idea that's been considered here is that they could or should include stringent backstops in a way. So say, for example, we're 10 years in out of our 20 years and we realize we're not hitting those goals. What type of stringent backstops are we going to have to ensure that we don't get out of compliance? So just a quick overview of where we're at with this particular piece. In July, the draft PMA was released, and the stakeholder committee reviewed that as sort of a straw man prioritization and gave the management committee feedback on that. Earlier this month, your stakeholder advisory committee met again and provided recommendations on some more of the nitty-gritty and the specifics that we'll be talking about today. It's coming for you today for that recommendation in consideration of those. And then next month, we'll be releasing the draft GSP in its entirety for a 60-day public comment period. After that, the advisory committee will be meeting again to provide feedback on the entire GSP. And then in October, on the 20th, so far as the date that we've got held in person, we're not sure with COVID restrictions if it's going to be in person or not, but that will be a public workshop where public can come understand it. You know, we're really hoping to target a larger group than we've been able to reach out to so far. So really helping people understand where the plan is, how they can comment on it, and really just explain it. And then again, in November, the advisory committee will be meeting again and this board to hold a joint hearing on taking further comments. And then finally, December, adoption of the GSP, which then goes to DWR, and that kicks off a whole entire new public comment period. So, you know, there's very many opportunities for people to weigh in and provide feedback on this particular plan. So let's jump in. I'm going to give you an overview of the planned projects. I hope that you've had a chance to read through the chapter, but I'll give you some bullet points of the planned projects. We won't really go into the detail of the potential so much, and then we'll talk about management actions after that. So planned projects, as opposed to potential or long-term projects, these are projects that we feel will move forward before our 10-year period after we submit, so by 2042. This is a list of the planned projects after consideration with the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee, and I'll just jump into the details here. So the first one is residential conservation, and this is really sponsored by the GSA and municipal water providers, such as Thermalito Water and Sewer District, Cal Water, et cetera. And the idea is that the project would be implementing the goals that are already in their urban water management plans. And so these are projects that they're planning on putting in place. If we get this into our GSP plan, it might open it up for additional funding to help that either expand or have a different funding source. And we expect that to be between 100 and 200 acre feet of year of a reduction in groundwater demand. And if there's any questions as I go through each one of these, just please interrupt. Another project is the Ag Irrigation Efficiency Project, and this would be sponsored by the Wyandotte Creek GSA. This is currently a project where the agricultural groundwater users of Butte County and the Farm Bureau have put together a survey of producers, mostly in the Vina subbasin area. And so it's really getting at understanding some of their irrigation practices. So the idea with that is that once we get the results, well, the results are actually in hand, but they need to be gone through with some analysis. And then the AGUBC is going to provide some recommendations on implementing those and any challenges or barriers to implementing those. So while this is pretty focused in a different subbasin, we felt like a lot of these same projects could be applicable to the Wyandotte Creek subbasin as well. And so that could provide up to 4,000 acre feet of reduction in groundwater demand as well. Floodmar project. So this is a project that was designed to really capture some of our specific landowner submitted projects. And so this would be identifying specific locations and resources that would be applicable for recharge in the subbasin. And this would be using high flows during the flood season and capturing those to provide recharge opportunities. We expected that to cover over the next 10 years or so as the opportunities arise. And it would really start with a study to understand, where those areas are, where the best recharge areas are, and where that is feasible. Another project is the Oroville Wildlife Area Robinson's Riffle project. And this is, this was submitted by the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. In essence, this is a reduction of some of the areas of the Feather River floodplain to help the river inundate specific areas during flood times. It'll benefit a number of different species, but also it will benefit invasive species, it'll removal of those, and really sort of let the river meander and increase the surface area available for percolation and groundwater recharge in that particular area.
And protect Oroville from back flooding.
Good point. Yes.
And it's lowering the levee. You kind of said it a little bit backwards.
Okay.
That's what we want to do. We want to lower the levee so the water surges over into the wildlife area instead of going down the river channel, hitting the corner, backing up, and
Oh, I see.
flooding back into the sewer
Okay.
plant.
Thanks for that clarification.
All right.
Okay, and then Streamflow Augmentation Project, another planned project. This would be a proponent of the GSA, PG&E, and other surface water right holders in the subbasin. So really looking at recharge from diverted water from creeks and streams onto a series of different potential areas. So this could be private landowner properties. This could be, public areas if that works as well too. This would be something that would probably extend. I would probably update that slide to extend further out because we'll have to identify these areas and really that's probably more of an ongoing project. So, but we do expect an estimate of groundwater reduction between 1,000 and 5,000 feet, acre feet per year.
Could you explain in lieu recharge?
Sure. So in essence, in lieu recharge is the idea that if you are a groundwater pumper, say you're irrigating your crops, but then you get a surface water supply delivered to you that you could irrigate your crops with instead. The idea is that you're not necessarily putting surface water in the ground, but because you're not using groundwater anymore, that's in lieu recharge. It's staying where it is as opposed to being pumped out. So it's really just an alternative source.
So you get credit for it. If you're the landowner, you get credit
I believe so.
for not pumping that.
Well, if there was some sort of, if there was a credit system set up. But this is just a general term of what in lieu recharge is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. Another project, I think I skipped one, nope, is the Palermo Clean Water Improvement Project. And this would be mainly led by the GSA, South Feather Water and Power in Butte County. And as you know, you've probably heard us talk about this before, but there's a water quality issue in Palermo. There's some shallow wells, mostly in the domestic household areas of Palermo. There's also failing septic systems in the area and drainage issues. So when water and floodwaters come through, we've got some contamination from the septic systems into the drinking water, which is not a good scene. So this would be a project which expands South Feather Water and Power's service area to get these particular households on to their clean water source so that they are not using well water for their drinking water supply. And the Thermalito Water and Sewer District water treatment plant is another planned project, and this would be increasing the capacity of the water treatment plant, serving the city of Oroville and the surrounding areas, which would really provide some decrease on the amount of groundwater that's pumped to serve those needs in the current situation. So that's an overview of the 7 planned projects in the draft chapter. And like I said, these are currently in the planning stages and they may move forward with funding available. So if there's any questions about these, this would be a good time.
I don't like injection wells, already been on record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, these are potentials.
Yeah, those I'm good with.
Sorry,
First one.
I jumped
Anybody else
ahead of
have any
myself.
comments on that? Yeah, on the first part. Yeah.
Okay,
You all good with that?
well, yeah, with just the plan, I skipped ahead a slide, but we can go through the potentials and then the others, and then I'll come back for some questions.
Well, I don't think there's any objection to what you already presented, so we
Okay.
can just leave it.
Okay. So these are the additional projects that were identified in the chapter. Interbasin water transfers, ag surface water supplies, well upgrades, fuel management in the upper watershed, removal of invasive species, recharge wells, and extending orchard replacement. And like I said, these are currently in the planning stages and may move forward. So if there's, and these are all detailed in the chapter, but I'm happy to answer any questions about these if you have any.
I guess, I mean, orchard replacement, shouldn't that be a business decision? Right? I mean, we shouldn't pay people to take orchards out. It should be like, you don't have enough water, so you do it. Or the goal would be to make sure they have enough water and they water in a sustainable manner. They could keep orchards. I hate to put people out of business. And I don't know, extend orchard replacement. I know of nothing in Butte County where we pay somebody to take their orchards out, do we? Christina, am I wrong? Is there some plan to pay people to take orchards out somewhere?
So actually, this one is that extend means that if a grower was already turning over their orchard, you could provide some sort of incentive program to have them wait a year. And so then you release, you reduce the demand on the basin by them
Oh, so
waiting
in lieu
to
recharge.
replant,
You
Yeah.
get in lieu recharge for a year.
essentially, right? So that's the concept behind that.
And this would be depending on the financial incentives and also willingness of the growers to participate in this
How
program.
healthy our groundwater is.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't know yet, right?
Absolutely. Like, good point. If we don't need to implement these PMAs because our levels are good, these aren't necessarily going to be implemented, but they're options. If we do get to that 5-year mark and we say, well, we thought we were here, but we're actually here, we need to do something, what can we pull off the bookshelf and try to implement?
So explain to me how we relate to invasive species. We're talking flora, right?
Yeah,
Or
it's a good
fauna.
point. When we originally crafted this PMA, the idea was that it was non-native invasive species. So if you think about something like a Rhododendron, giant reed, out on the banks of the Feather River, it keeps the river in its specific banks. Removal of something like that could allow more meandering of natural creek systems. It could also reduce the demand of the water uptake from
It's
the
like
plants.
hydrilla in these creeks, it's all plugged up now, or water lilies, they're not native. They're plugging a lot of creeks.
I think they would have to be ranked based on priority. So something like, how much does the plant itself actually uptake in water? That would be, part of it. Does it increase the amount of water that's percolating down where that plant would have taken that habitat otherwise? Does it allow the creek or stream to meander in a more natural way that increases the surface area available for that percolation and leakage? A number of things like that would have to be taken into account.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so just a couple of data collection-based projects are also included in the project. One is a 3-county contour mapping, and this would really give us an idea of our groundwater levels. If you think about a topography map and you've got the lines on the map that say, well, here's about where 80 feet are, that would be under the surface of the ground and where our water levels are and kind of how those contour and get a better idea of where our water table is. The other project is updating the Butte Basin groundwater model, and I'm not sure exactly what that would, I know you probably have more details on that, Christina, but.
I think, and it was proposed by folks from Chico State, but I think it's just recognizing that tool, continues to be useful, was used for water budgets for this plan, but there's always improvements that can be made, either in how the hydrogeology is represented or how the water budget is represented. And so, updating and bringing the best available information and data that we have at the time. That will be kind of a tool that needs to continue to be updated for it to be useful in the future. Or if there are other groundwater models that are identified as being more useful, there's that possibility too. So it's kind of a project with that in mind.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll go through public comments real quick on the projects. In general, and they're all attached into your packet, there was support for Streamflow augmentations and a request to specify which streams would be included, specifically asking for an inclusion of Ruddy Creek. There was support for removal of invasive species in Ruddy Creek, and also concerns about recharge wells or injection wells, which we've heard from you all as well, on environmental health risks and really putting treated water back into the natural environment. Sorry about the typo here, but there was also a WAC recommendation on projects. And unanimously, your advisory committee recommended to not rank the potential projects, but really just look at ranking the ones that are planned, given the fact that they're still needing quite a bit of funding and scoping to be proposed. And so here we come to a recommendation from you on these, and specifically, we'd like to hear from you on which projects should be included in the draft, and if there's any changes to the proposed ranking of the planned projects, if the potential projects should be ranked, and then any other changes to the project side. And we'll do this in just a minute for the management actions as well, but right now just for projects. So.
I don't have any problem with them, but if somebody else does. It seems like hydrant metering would be really easy to do, wouldn't it? I mean,
I think it's a planned project for some of our municipal water providers at the moment. And so, yeah, having this in the plan and really leveraged for more potential funding is the idea behind this.
I did have just a quick question. So have we identified those landowners with water rights that draft from the river? So in other words, if I'm a farmer and I've got an orchard and I'm drafting from the river, and it would seem like that would actually be a good thing for the groundwater.
Yeah, I agree. It's if you're using surface water, it's putting less pressure on the need for groundwater. And so the projects that involve that, we haven't really gone through and identified exactly who or where or when, but we have heard from project proponents, landowners that have submitted, which got rolled up into this larger project, and they said, well, we've got water rights and we've got great ideas for recharge areas, et cetera. But I think you're right. The first step would be to identify where those areas are, who those people are, and then scope that out.
Yeah, because it would almost be counter to it if it would be like maybe more orchards would be good. If I was a landowner and I had those rights to the surface water, it could actually be beneficial.
Right.
Just a thought.
So some of these, like the Robinson Riffle project, they're looking for a recommendation. They're not looking for us to bring money to the table, right? I mean, I'm on that board, and we thought we had it financed a couple times already through the Fish and Wildlife. In other words, I want to know if we're ranking them, if we're taking money away from ourselves. I mean, or what does that ranking actually mean?
Yeah, it's a good project.
You follow what I'm saying? I don't quite have my head around it.
Right. It's not that we are only going to go to project 1 and then project 2 and then
Okay.
project 3. I think the idea is that when funding becomes available anything on this list is
Okay.
up for funding, and then it's
And
a
then
matter
certain
of.
funding can only go certain places, so we could look at it that way too.
Right, and the
Right.
great way to think about that is that if it's not in the plan, it's not eligible for specific types of funding.
I think the feasibility of these can change depending on what funding becomes available, and as we get down the road and start doing the the data collection to figure out what's realistic and what's not, all of this stuff could fluctuate depending on a bunch of different variables, it seems like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure we're not locked in a certain
Yeah.
order. I
And-
get it now.
I do have another quick note on that, though. In talking with our team that's working on helping us draft this GSP and Geosyntec, some of what we've been hearing about the implementation funding coming through DWR is that at one point, we weren't sure if it was going to be a competitive type of ask at that point. So the idea behind the ranking at that point in time was more geared towards that. We tend to think that that's actually not going to be a competitive funding source. So it will be distributed to GSAs that submit their GSP. So I think this is sort of a remnant, a relic from the past, the way we were thinking about it. But as we've moved forward, it's not as important, the ranking itself. So
Okay,
at this point, it might be even null.
I'm good. Everybody good with that?
I'm good.
I think it was explained.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill, you're so quiet.
Well, I'm good with it. I was looking at the Palermo Clean Water Improvement Project, and I know that's dependent on grants. But are we part of that, or or South Feather looking elsewhere for those grants?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So there's a number of, I think, good possible funding sources for that project. And this, Sigma implementation funding could be a part of that, but I certainly wouldn't look to that as its only source. We're in the process of putting together an application through the state revolving fund, so that might be part of it.
Yeah, so it's complicated.
Yep.
Because any funds we might have access to, it could be competitive. Then we have to look and see if some of these projects can get funding from other sources, and it's a balancing act.
Right.
So-
And I think that conversation will really be more focused once we have the PSP or the proposal information guidelines for the implementation funding. Then
Yeah.
we'll come back to you and say, okay, we're going to apply for Sigma implementation. What projects do you want to actually go after for that money?
Yeah.
There is a little county, well, more than a little, there's county interest on the board, not only myself, to look at some of the one-time monies we've received to help pay for part of it. So it is, in other words, there's seed money. I mean, it might work. I'd really like to get that one done.
Yeah, and we'll be bringing more information to the Butte County Board of Supervisors on that at the end of September.
And is that regional group looking at, that's part of their project too, right?
Yeah, it was just added by the NSV board yesterday to the project list of the IRWM plan. So there's also some money there too. So there's 4 or 5 different potential funding sources, and I think we'll probably need 3 or 4 of them at least, to get that project done. But it's really looking pretty promising at this
Yeah,
point.
it was tough at the regional area because they had a couple projects that were even more needed. Like Pascana has no water, and another community had very, very polluted water. And so I'm not on there anymore, but when I was there, I was always advocating, and glad that it got back on the list again.
I remember that.
Chair Conley, do you mind if we make a formal motion to
Sure.
accept the projects and the ranking?
And we're just going to go over the planned projects?
I think,
Or do you want to do potential projects? Can we do it, projects all at
I
once?
think we could probably wrap it into one motion of accepting the projects as is with the ranking, and that would cover it.
Make it.
I move we accept the planned and potential projects.
I'll second.
Guys, man, all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimously.
Okay, so let's move on to management actions.
I'm sorry, is that approving potential and planned? for the minutes.
Yes.
Thank
You
you.
know what? I didn't call for public comment. Would the
Oh.
public like to speak? Any phone-in comment?
We had one, sorry, we had one written that I believe was touched on and you received
We got
through
it in our
email.
packet.
Yes.
Okay. So it's legal. Uh-oh, who's that ugly guy with a beard there?
I do have a couple more slides. If we want to go to full screen, perfect. All right, so let me get back to where I was. No problem, just close your eyes for a moment. Okay, management actions. So management actions, as a reminder, these are really focused on groundwater demand, and they can be part of the GSPs. They can include data collection, education and outreach, regulatory policies, incentive programs, and also enforcement actions. So the proposed management actions in the draft GSP include general plan updates, domestic well mitigations, well permitting ordinances, landscaping ordinance, expansion of water purveyor service areas, a large diameter well moratorium, and also a action on groundwater allocation. The note here on the bottom is something that was proposed by the advisory committee for a number of these particular management actions. Comments received from the public. There was concern about general plan updates and ordinances, and really the timing with the different agencies on their processes and whether or not the timing will be aligned to be able to have those involved in their development as they move forward. The advisory committee of this board had some specific recommendations also. And so that was kind of the note on the last slide, but what they suggested was really softening the language around the GSA's role to indicate that this GSA is intending to work with the respective agencies to coordinate and participate with them in some of these ordinances and moving forward that way. There was, as you can see, some discussion about removing the landscape ordinance. Most were neutral. And there was discussion about removing the large well moratorium from the list. And you can see that was a unanimous vote by the advisory committee, as well as removal of the groundwater allocation management action, which was also a unanimous vote of your advisory committee. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the management areas or management actions. Bad acronym, we use it for both. But we'd like to see which ones that you would like to include in the draft GSP and any other changes that you see fit.
I'm going to ask you this. If they weren't in there and we have a crisis, can we then implement them later? Because when you put it up front like that, you're going to scare a lot of people that might not cooperate with us like they will if we don't. Especially like if I'm a farmer and you got in there that you're going to do away with large diameter wells, I'm probably not going to let you put a test well on my property or test my well, right? I mean, I have no incentive to do it. So I'd rather follow. I liked what they said, and then and I'll shut up after this. On the who's going to be the police to go out and check what plants I got in my yard or whatever. I don't like to pass things we don't have any enforcement over it. I mean, and in the back of my mind, all this water goes to Southern California, and they got lawns and swimming pools, and I'm up here requiring people to not have a lawn or whatever. I just don't like it. I like their recommendations. I would follow them all, except I wouldn't even want to tell you what you could plant. That's my opinion. What's yours?
No, I'm in agreement with that. Yeah.
You got any input to that?
I agree. I think keeping it, as flexible as we can, but make sure that we accomplish what we need to accomplish, I think is good.
Could you back it up one? I
Sure.
didn't get this.
Just on your point, Chair Conley, we can add and update the GSP every 5-year interval. Or if we wanted to do it sooner, we could do that as well.
Yeah, if we find the groundwater's crashing and there is a real reduction, then that's what why we're forming this, and then we'll be responsible to react to it. And I'll just repeat myself. I think if we put this up front, it's going to send a message of enforcement before we have a known need, and it will. I know the people that live around here. Landscape ordinance, man, that'd be better if LA had to do away with their swimming pools, wouldn't it? I mean, sorry. What are you good with it, Bill?
No, I'm not good with it. I
Okay.
would rather keep these up front so that people realize we're in a serious drought and another year, and it could become untenable. So no, I'm not good with softening and removing.
Okay.
I like it the way it was.
Yeah, that's why we have you here, a different voice. All right, do you need a motion on this stuff?
I do.
I move that we accept the advisory committee's recommendations.
I'll second.
All right, call the roll.
Board Member Conley,
Aye.
Board Member Smith,
Yes?
Board Member Byram,
No,
Board Member Daly.
Aye.
I appreciate your
Motion
position.
carries.
And you might be able to tell, I told you so sometime, but we'll see.
we'll see.
All right, now what are we on to?
I wanted to just ask, to digress just for a moment, kind of in the other conversation, just thought to hit the back of my head, which is Fish and Wildlife. There's a lot of projects, future projects for the wildlife area for more flood. In fact, there's some weirs that they built out there a couple of years ago to allow for more flooding. Is there any conversation with their future projects and how that might impact? And or maybe support for an expansion of some of those projects for habitat, for
Sure.
the various salmon and steelhead, that type of thing.
Sure, and we did reach out to the agencies when we were originally asking for ideas for PMAs. And also, we've directly reached out to them for comments on the chapter. I think it's a great idea. I think that as those get fleshed out more, and especially in these 5-year updates between now and then, I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't specifically aware of those, but that seems like a great fit for exactly what we're trying to do.
Because it seems like it would, if they enhance some of those areas that way, it would seem to, help with this issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that Wyman's Ravine that runs through behind your house? Mm-hmm. That thing needs to be
Just
cleaned
wanted to
out.
clarify real quick, accepting the advisory committee recommendations would be to keep the landscape ordinance
Yeah,
in,
I don't
because
like
it was
it,
mostly neutral.
that's what the motion was, and I went with it.
Okay, just wanted to clarify, thanks.
There's no landscape police, so it's not gonna happen.
Okay, I think we're on to the next item, right?
Well, there is if you live in a gated community.
So you can bring mine up, yeah, please. Okay, so, great, so we're gonna move on to agenda item 3, I guess, on the regular, business. And I'm gonna walk us through the, implementation chapter. So this is a chapter that has not gone out in draft form. And so what we're looking for is, I'm gonna give you kind of the nuts and the bolts of what will be in the chapter, get some of your direction on a couple key points, and then that will be included with the whole GSP when it goes out for review, in just a couple weeks in September. So that's what I just said. That will include a discussion here today of Interbasin Coordination, and so we're just looking for your input on a few key topics here. Okay, so the outline of the implementation chapter, it includes, number 1, an estimate of GSP implementation costs, and I'll give you a little more detail on that. Identifying funding alternatives. One of the things that the plan has to do is describe how you're going to fund yourself as a GSA and how you're going to fund the projects that the GSP says are going to be done. The third part is a schedule for implementation, what will happen when, a discussion somewhere in the GSP about data management systems, and so that's going to be in this chapter. And then annual reporting is required, and 5-year update evaluation reports are required to be submitted to DWR, and then Interbasin Coordination, how we intend to coordinate with our neighbors going forward. So we'll just take it from the top. Implementation costs. So in the chapter, there's just some estimates of these different key activities and estimates of the costs associated with them. The first category there is administrative costs, and I'll drill into that a little bit on the next slide. It's estimated, rough estimate, $150,000 to $300,000 per year. Right now, your member agencies are providing in-kind staff support to do some of that work, but going forward, there will be some additional activities and administrative costs that are needed as well.
I think Orville should pay it.
Yeah, give them a bell. There's also monitoring activity requirements, and currently the Department of Water Resources Northern Region Office does, biannual monitoring, and our department also does some monitoring. But it's important, I think, to capture the costs of those activities, even if they're already being done. So that's kind of the approach that's been taken in this chapter. In addition, data analysis activities, $10,000 per year. And then reporting and evaluation activities. So there's the ongoing annual report. That's estimated at $30,000 per year. The Butte County does currently do an annual groundwater status report, and our intent is to adapt that report to meet the requirements of SGMA, so that there's efficiency of workload, both in meeting county reporting and now these GSP reporting requirements. And then data gaps are described in this chapter in terms of which ones need to be addressed, and what activities are intended to address those, and then projects and management actions. So going back to the administrative costs is just a breakdown of how we got to that $150,000 estimate. It includes an estimate of about $15,000 per year for public outreach, just a broad category of staff for about $100,000, but that includes administration of the board, the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee, developing projects and programs, grant administration, grant development. So all of those administrative type activities. Legal budget about $20,000 per year, and then facilities and supplies, recognizing that even meeting in the chambers like this has some cost associated with it, even though right now it's in-kind cost. So that's, again, how that 150 came from.
And the city would be able to bill for that.
Yeah.
It was a joke.
That's what was that?
So this is an important piece of the chapter too, and of the plan, is to identify, okay, how are we going to cover these costs? And so a couple of different things will be described in the chapter. First, it will describe existing programs and activities that are doing some of this work already, including GSA member agency contributions and in-kind staff contributions. It will also describe state and federal grant funding opportunities, and specifically Proposition 68 SGMA implementation grant, right, that we will look to, especially for data gap and some of the projects and management action funding. And then right now, this is the consultants drafted essentially this statement that says the GSA is evaluating Proposition 218, or you might say, or other funding mechanisms to support ongoing operational costs and to fund agency operations. So the question that we're looking for some board direction on is that how you want to characterize it? We're evaluating the options and it might be pursued, or do you want to be a little stronger that a funding mechanism will be pursued as part of plan implementation in the short term? And if so, do you want to include an estimate of, what it would take to do that? It's a pretty costly, even just, that process of doing an 218 is costly. So I'll pause there for discussion and direction.
I don't
I
think,
don't know what Prop 218 is.
okay.
Yeah, so
Tell her. 'Cause
it's like a whole thing, and I don't know the details either, but it's a mechanism for taxing parcel tax. So
we'd actually go out and
great.
ask people if they would tax themselves to support us monitoring the groundwater.
Prop 218 is the actual state legislature. It's the state legislature defines the process of basically how you collect public funds. Like, we have to do a Prop 218 here hearing every time we raise water rates, or if you raise sewer rates, or if you up county taxes, you have to do Prop 218 hearings.
So if we were to assess a fee, essentially, we would have to.
Abide by the
Abide
Prop
by-
218
got it.
process to be able to establish those fees.
Got it.
We're forming a district, so we'd also have to go through LAFCO to form the district because we're collecting a tax, wouldn't we? Or is that covered, because this is a special bill, we don't have to?
You're already a special agency, a groundwater
Yeah,
sustainability
they went
agency.
around LAFCO, that's right.
Yeah, so the law designates GSAs the authority to raise fees. And maybe, Mayor, I guess you're on the line, there are other funding mechanisms as well. I think you could,
We have no chance in hell of getting that
Yeah.
passed in this district, right?
Would that be voted on by acres or by individuals?
That's a good question.
so maybe a mayor or,
Andrew is on the line as well, too, our legal counsel, if he's got any more input on the, how a 218 works.
We're gonna have to take down your slides for a second so we can check our Zoom. Thank you.
and also.
Yes, this is
yeah.
Andrew Ramos, BKS. I'm the GSA's counsel. It really depends on what sort of fee and how it's characterized, what process is required. I think this is something where it probably requires some additional discussion with the board because these issues are very complicated. There's various ways that you could go, some with more chance of success and others with less. And the voting requirements change depending on how you characterize the fee and what you're raising it for. So this is my way of saying there are a lot of different options available to you, but they require some significant study and some strategy involved in what might be palatable to your voters.
So at this time,
Looks like Amir has his hand raised.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is Amir Hussein. I'm with Geosyntech Consultants. We're the consultants for the GSP preparation. But I just wanted to add, Andrew's absolutely correct. There's a variety of different methods you can use, Prop 218, Prop 26, pumping fees, and several others. I do want to just remind everyone that SIGMA does require that we identify how the GSA is going to fund itself, the agency is going to fund itself. And so the idea behind what we wrote here was to at least allow the board to consider that the 218 election is one alternative and then make it clear that we're still evaluating other alternatives as well.
So other alternatives besides grants and a fee structure, there's some other avenues that we can explore. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think there's basically, other than Proposition 218, there's other funding mechanisms like Andrew and Amira just mentioned. But, I mean, there is an ongoing cost of this agency, and it's going to need to be paid for somehow, right? So that's kind of what this section of the plan needs to address. So I guess our question at this point, you know, this is a complex and deep topic, you know, to really bring back to you in terms of what that looks like in detail. At this point, we're looking for how strong of language or how specific or general do you want to be in the GSP at this time? That you're evaluating or that you're
I
planning to
think-
do this?
Yeah, I
or-
think you got to keep it really general because there's a different, you know, it comes to mind that maybe the county, the water district's involved, and maybe the city could share that in some portion manner, but that'd take a lot of discussion. Then how about, can we offset it with grants? Will it be on, because the state wants this so much and wants it implemented, will they have a funding source that we can just draw on every year? I don't really want to make a decision. I mean, in my mind, I'm getting a headache right now because the worst thing you can do is go to South County and ask for a tax. I just don't think it's going to go. What do you guys think?
I'm in agreement with what I think between the city and the county.
We could look at it.
Yeah, I think so.
In the water districts, maybe.
As far as submitting this proposal to the state, would that verbiage fly as far as being how strong it is or not strong it is, would they accept that kind of language right now, do you think?
Yeah, I would ask Andrew or Amir maybe to weigh in on that. Oh, are you gonna have to? Oh, go ahead.
This is Andrew. I actually have to defer to Amir on this one because as to what DWR is looking for in judging the plan sufficiency, I'm not sure offhand how much detail you have to have on this subject. I don't know if he has any experience on that.
This is all fun
So-
until we start doing stuff.
I can tell you, I can tell you, gentlemen, that we just got some comments on another GSA subbasin that we're working with. We didn't write the plan, but we're implementing the plan, and DWR did make it clear that they were looking for as much detail in these GSPs as they could get on funding sources. They didn't specifically say that about funding the GSA. They were talking about some of the projects and other parts that required funding. But yes, I feel my personal opinion is, and what I've seen in other plans and what we've prepared in other plans, is that you can write it saying that you're evaluating multiple options right now, and you don't have to commit to a specific option, but you should make it clear to DWR that you are willing to do that evaluation and commit to some future funding source during the implementation stage.
I think I agree with Bill Connolly that if the state wants it, they should fund it. This is like an unfunded mandate. That's,
I completely
Welcome
agree.
to my world,
Get used to it.
right? I mean,
With,
yeah, that's another thing. We can talk to our assemblyman or senator and see if they're,
yeah. I like the language then, keeping it as, I guess, flexible as we can. But again, SB 88 was very similar. They required monitoring of surface water diversions, even for pre-1914 water rights that we have. They just said, you have to figure this out and you have to pay for it. And because we don't have the ability to take in the data or monitor it or do anything with it, we just want to have it. And so we had to pay to have all this done. There's no service provided, but we basically had to pay for it ourselves. And it just seems like another regulation that we would have to pay for ourselves with no service added, I guess.
so it's clear as mud.
Clear as mud. So I think we'll go with evaluating multiple funding mechanisms, and
Yes.
you'll see how the language shakes out in the draft GSP, and we can revisit it if
And then
necessary.
maybe we could have conversations between the city, county, and the water districts, and if it's, I mean, along with grant money or something.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I think we've got what we need. Thank you.
well,
Okay.
since South Feather's not sitting on the board, we could have them pay about 90% of it.
And then ask them to dump water out there and in lieu of recharge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's gonna work great. No, I don't think we better do that.
Okay, so another section of the chapter here is data management system. So it's going to be a really pretty high level description. Currently, the data management system that will be used is a geographical relational database that will include information on water levels, land elevation measurements, and water quality monitoring. The DMS will allow GSAs to share data and store the necessary information for annual reporting. Basically, our data management system is a series of files, spreadsheets, mapping files. So we have what we need, to do this GSP. It would definitely benefit from a little investment of time and resources to organize it, make it more accessible, and kind of bring it into one place that would be a cleaner, really kind of data management
Do
system.
we need to make a motion on this and the prior action, or just give you guidance?
I think direction at this point is fine.
Yes.
If you're comfortable with
I
that.
mean, everybody wants that.
Okay. Data management
Yeah, and then
system.
it's-
Yeah, so if
yeah.
you're supportive of us writing in, we intend
Absolutely.
to update our data and it could cost $50,000,
'Cause
we would
again-
pursue grant funding.
Again, that's that transparency. We don't want the public to think we're trying to sneak around or do something.
Yeah. Yep.
They'll be able to click on there and look at it.
Yeah.
Because right now, it is difficult and there's a lot of missing information. I was appalled when I tried to get information. There's little or none. I think it needs a massive upgrade.
Okay.
Well, and if you, and we can come back, I think when we talk about Prop 68 funding too, data management system upgrade could be part of that conversation. And maybe it's a $200,000 project to really make a public, this is not, I would say $50,000 is not a public interface DMS system. It's
Okay.
let's just get our ducks in a row better.
Well, I
That would
think-
then position us for a more,
I don't mean to speak
Robust.
in front of the board all the time, but I think the more you have clarity and people can look, the less problems we'll have. Then it's right there. It's not conjecture. We can put the science up.
Yep.
I think we
And-
got all nods
yeah.
on that, so, yeah.
okay, should we beef this up, sounds like?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Great, we will do that. Especially in a subbasin like this, I think where there's not a huge need for correctional actions, related to demand or projects. That probably should be the focus, is to really get our house in order, to better understand the subbasin and be able to make better, decisions about what needs to be done or what doesn't need to be done. Okay, so the schedule is also in the chapter. And this is really, I think, one of the main places where all of this information is in one place on a list that says, these are the activities that need to be done and kind of the priority in terms of timing. So we will be adopting and submitting the plan in January of 2022. Public outreach will be an ongoing activity over the next 20 years. Monitoring is an ongoing activity. Develop initial DMS, so we'll update that to reflect your input there for that to be a more robust project. And that would be something that we could hit, next year after submission of the plan. Annual reports will happen, of course, every year, and Interbasin Coordination will be an ongoing activity. We'll have 5-year updates. And then we have the data gaps and some time frames on those, so contour mapping. That could be a project that we could start working on after submission. The data management system would certainly facilitate and support that work as well. As well as the updating of the Butte Basin groundwater model or modeling tools. Project implementation, so here's where you see the number of the planned projects that actually are assigned a timeline of when they, implementation would start on those. And then adaptive management, there's gonna be ongoing, need to evaluate potential projects, evaluate new projects that may not exist yet, and then evaluate management actions, so as needed. So this is, any observations or input or questions on what you want to see changed, or does this look good for now?
Ruddy Creek's a real problem for a lot of reasons. I mean, I don't know who gave that input. It's really plugged up and it doesn't drain well and it causes flooding. And it could there is room for recharge because it's out in Thermalito and there's flat areas that you could maybe put little weirs or dams there and put in recharge projects and also help control the flooding. So I'd like to see it moved up.
You say the same thing about Wyman Creek.
Yeah, and Wyandotte Creek is major. I would say the same thing about that. I mean, floods Palermo, and it has a hard time getting to where it's going, which is out in a wildlife area eventually.
Are those under, can you help me understand what PMA those are under?
Yeah, so in general, that would be likely falling under the Floodmar project and/or
Invasive species both contain a lot
invasive
of
species, as
yeah.
well as the, I think it's the Streamflow Augmentation project.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, Ruddy Creek is really interesting. Those springs on the side of the mountain when you go up 70 on the left above the forebay, that's where it started. And it would flow down where the forebay is now, and then it goes down through the neighborhoods all the way down to the wildlife area, and then Wyman's.
What part of Thermalito does it go through?
Like 16th.
Yeah, it goes under Nelson Avenue and Grand Avenue and all the way through there. It goes right there by the Moose Lodge, actually.
Okay.
We've actually been trying to work with the county for a long time, trying to get them to clean that up.
We, Fish and Wildlife came down on us years ago. I've looked into, we're getting kind of digressing, but yeah, Fish and Wildlife, put a halt to it a couple times, but it really doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't run enough to have fish in it anymore. Back in the day, salmon would come off it. I mean, talking 50, 60 years ago, but for the dam.
Pre-dam.
Yeah.
So based off this schedule, it's basically saying, and it sounds like that, you know, scoping that up really could fall under that FLEDMAR, which is project number 3 there. So this is really saying, you know, once we submit the plan, we start thinking about implementing projects, we're gonna develop further the residential conservation, the ag irrigation efficiency, FLEDMAR, and the Orville Riffle project. Of course, you know, you guys could give other direction, but that's what, you know, is going to be in the schedule of GSP at this point. Sound good?
Looks good to me.
All right.
And I think, okay, so then we're going to talk about Interbasin Coordination. This is part of the chapter also. There's a staff from subbasins throughout the northern Sacramento Valley have been meeting and shifted in February to really thinking longer term as we were staring down the barrel of getting these GSPs drafted that, okay, we're not going to be able to compare all of our data and numbers right now, but what we should do is think about how we're going to talk to each other and cooperate over the long term of implementing these plans. And so the result of that is this document that's linked there to a framework for interbasin coordination. And so in that document is a menu of potential coordination topics and activities, and these 5 pillars. So the first is information sharing, and I'll dive more into the details of these. But then joint analysis and evaluation, really basically understanding what we've each put in our GSPs and doing some comparison there to identify potential concerns. Coordination on mutually beneficial activities, coordinated communications and outreach, and then issue resolution. So for Wyandotte Creek, we want to just think about who are our neighbors and what level of coordination, what types of activities do we want to engage in, you know, after GSP submission. So Wyandotte Creek, we have a neighbor to the west, the Butte subbasin. We have a neighbor to the south, the North Yuba subbasin. We have a tiny bit of our border that intersects with the Sutter subbasin. So we can kind of think about these activities, you know, in relation to these neighbors. We also, of course, have the Feather River on our western boundary, and that is shared by the Butte Subbasin, Sutter, and North Yuba. And so there may be some topics and some, you know, related to stream depletions and interconnected surface water, GDEs, where we might want to think a little bit broader, you know, with the 4 subbasins because we all have the Feather River in common. So with that, and this discussion was also brought to the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee, and so these recommendations reflect their input. And so what we're looking for and what we'll have in the implementation chapter is basically a description of what Wyandotte Creek subbasin intends to do, you know, with our neighbors going forward. So the recommendation on this information sharing would be sharing annual reports, data and information to really, you know, move toward having shared data where it makes sense with our neighbors. So the recommendation could be that Wyandotte Creek subbasin will work with GSA staff of Butte and North Yuba subbasins to identify lines of communication and methods for information sharing. So really identify how we talk to each other and then share these types of data that are listed above, annual reports and shared data across basin boundaries.
So there was a big thing that this was all being done in secret, and we got over that now because I don't think it ever was in secret. I think the law calls for us to coordinate, and we can't harm each other, right? So if I had a concern, it'd be North Yuba, that we might harm them or they may be harming us. It seems like that would be the rest of it, the river. Who knows?
Yeah, things are pretty stable on our side of the river, on Feather River. Things are pretty stable on the Butte subbasin side. Yeah.
Yeah, but down there in the very bottom of us, it's not so good.
Yeah, and I think that this really says let's at least know who's doing the GSP over there, and they know, you know, who we are, and there's opportunities to understand what their activities are and what our activities are. And so then this gets to, and this may be especially relevant to North Yuba, is once we adopt and submit our GSPs this would take, a bit of work. So this would require some pursuing grant funding to collaboratively work with subbasins. And we could do it if you think we just, it's really most relevant for North Yuba. We could just focus on North Yuba, or we could, zoom out to the Feather River Corridor group, to those 4 subbasins, and say, hey, let's hire a consultant to take a look at our GSPs, understand what data is being used, if there's any inconsistencies there that we could come, collaborate and come into alignment on. Let's take a look at how we set our sustainable management criteria and see if there's any huge disconnect at the boundary that needs to be addressed. And really engaging in analysis and evaluation of our GSPs to be able to identify those potential significant differences up front and then be able to work through them. So that's what this pillar suggests. Again, it would be an effort that would take consultant work and some sort of funding, which we suggest would be grant funded. Any comments, or is this something that you would support describing as something that the Wyandotte Creek would want to pursue?
We have to. It's in the law, right?
Well, ultimately, this is us being proactive. So we wouldn't have to. We could all just submit our plans, and ultimately DWR has to do this evaluation.
Want that.
Exactly. That's what, as staff, we think it's a good idea to
Right.
understand ourselves and our neighbors, and they understand us, and we figure it out.
There's Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yeah, they're all true.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so you'll see that written up in the chapter. And then this one, pillar 3, is mutually beneficial activities. It really just means, hey, let's take a look at their projects, let's take a look at ours and data gaps and see if there's, overlap, and it makes sense to collaborate and pursue grant funding together or streamline those processes. So that's what this one's about. And we could do that with our 4 subbasins, especially if it relates to stream gauging on the Feather River or monitoring shallow groundwater along the Feather River, things like that.
Then there's Honcut Creek. That's the southern border, and
Right.
it's a mess too. And I was thinking about it now. It's appropriate time. That would be a joint effort because it's right on the border,
Yep.
mostly.
Yeah, exactly. So we could have a conversation with them. How is that characterized in your plan? How is it characterized in our plan? Or is it
Yeah.
to the extent that it needs to be? Yeah. And then the 4th pillar is just coordinated communication and outreach, really thinking on a more regional scale with the North Sac Valley region. The Integrated Regional Water Management Planning Group has been doing this for a long time, right? 6 county regions sharing updates on SIGMA activities. And so this recommendation is just to say that we'll continue to participate in those conversations. And if there's public engagement activities, on a broader regional scale, we think that's important as well. And then number 5, and this is where we do want your input on this one, is issue resolution process. So the framework describes, this pillar as establishing and following an agreed upon process for identifying and resolving conflicts between GSAs by the first 5-year update. So the question is, should the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin pursue development of an issue resolution process with all of our neighbors, one of our neighbor? So who should that be pursued with? Or alternatively, let's just start with information sharing and mutually beneficial activities, and if it's warranted, we'll develop an issue resolution process in the future. So those are kind of the 2 options. The WAC discussed this, and they had some different perspectives. A couple of the members said they could go either way with this. Yeah, it's a good idea to do it first. We could wait. One member thought it was premature and preferred to wait. And one WAC member expressed the importance of having a plan in place. It's not a matter of if, but when there's some sort of conflict, and it would be time saving to have some plan in place for how to have that conversation. So what would you like to see
I
in
think
the
North
plan?
Yuba, we have the potential to be harming them, and they have the potential to be harming us because it's intensely agriculture. I think we should try and get something in place, because the way it works, if we don't, right, if the state will do it, we get to arguing among ourselves and,
Yeah, the states ultimately, you know, if one is harming another, they can come in and fix that. And I think this just
or we
recognizes
could wait,
too.
whatever you guys want to do.
More proactive, the better, in my opinion.
I would worry about that one.
So if we're proactive and we put and we list one of these sub-basins that we're neighbors with, that we could say, if there's a possible issue, it might be this one, so we list them specifically in this pillar. Is that essentially what is gonna happen here? Or,
I think you could be as specific or general as you want to be. We'll evaluate issue resolution process with our neighbors, or you could say, you know, we think North Yuba is the most likely conflict because of that shared boundary. Let's do it with that neighbor and hold off on Butte, whatever. Yeah, you could be specific or general.
I'll be surprised if there's not some conflict down there.
yeah. I agree. I mean,
Because I know the guys farming there that have problems with their wells now, and it's not marginal water, and
yeah. Well, I think being proactive is smart, so I'm okay with pursuing it, but maybe we should say with our neighbors so that we're not just singling anybody out. And
That's
then we
true.
also leave ourselves open to make sure that if there's an issue along the Feather River corridor or something similar, like we've got the plan in place. What's staff's position, I guess?
Yeah, I think, it's going to be, this is going to take time and effort, and, you know, the WAC discussion recognized that too, right? This is probably going to take a facilitated process. At least I think we would benefit from that. CBI did that really in the Butte Basin where there's 11 GSAs, right? That was a facilitated conversation to come to a coordination or cooperation agreement among those entities that described how they're going to communicate. It established this kind of central advisory body, those kinds of things, right? So it would take time and money to figure that out. I think you could start kind of with probably at the highest level with the 4 subbasins and identify what kinds of issues there might be. And it can be, and that's where there's actually good resources in the framework document. I don't have it in here. That describes, you know, it can be a very general, light touch, but there's still a plan for how you talk to each other. Or it can be very specific, you know, that has like mediation and what the steps are going to be if you run into a conflict. So, yeah, the range of kind of options for that.
Seems to me there should be an interest-based bargaining process where there's an ongoing dialogue with all of the players. And so you take up any issue as it comes up.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a living document, a living process.
Okay, so I'm hearing option 1 with probably the Feather River corridor group, which is the 4 subbasins.
yeah. Might as
That
well just
map.
do them all.
Okay.
And I bet the conversation will be most difficult with North Yuba for good reason. How far along are they?
They are done, actually. They've submitted already. So they were the first Sac Valley plan to submit. They've submitted for both North Yuba and South Yuba.
Do they have many test wells down there? Do you know?
You know, I haven't looked at their monitoring map recently. But that would be the first thing to, under kind of pillar 2, right, is to let's
Yeah.
look at your monitoring network, let's look at ours, and yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I think that is it, unless you have any other comments or discussion.
Public comment on this?
We didn't receive any public comment on this item.
All right.
Quick question.
Sure.
Have we been talking with, or collaborating with NRCS or the Farm Service Agency or anything like that as far as some of the information that we were, like the survey that Farm Bureau is putting out? I think a lot of that information might be, or they might be able to help us compile that information, I think, possibly.
Yeah, actually, Colleen Cecil with the Butte County Farm Bureau as a lead partner with the AGUBC in the in that particular survey you were talking about.
Okay.
Yep.
So they did design that survey with it in mind what other information is already available. So trying to take advantage of survey results of others or
Got it,
data
okay.
that's already out there and then focusing the survey to fill gaps. Yeah.
All right, so then we're moving on, right? Number 4, the board may approve change in dates. Chris?
Yeah, they let me deal with the hard one on today's agenda, and that's hopefully you guys have taken a look at your calendars and see if changing the dates of the November and December meetings from the Thursdays to the November 18th and the December 16th to try and avoid any conflicts with the holidays.
I don't have a life, I'll be here. Now, in January, we might have a problem.
Looks fine to me.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Thank you.
We got 3, that's good.
Yeah.
We don't need a motion on that, do we? It's just,
I believe that you do.
uh,
To changing it from the posted.
okay, somebody make a motion there, would you?
Yeah, I'll move that we change the dates to whatever you stated.
Sounds good.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go. Thank you very much. Then we're gonna move on to, where'd number 5 go? Went into the ether there. 6, financial report. I usually don't catch stuff like that.
This is just a written report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to field
Any
them.
questions? So we found out Orville's gonna pay it all now.
Right.
Yeah. Or South Feather, because they're not here. Public correspondence.
Again, that's just attached to your board packet.
Okay, we're good with that. Management committee report, verbal, Kelly.
Sure, I'll just give you a quick update. The Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee is next meeting on September 2nd, and those meetings occur at 9 a.m. in the morning. They're about 3 hours long, so if you'd like to chime in or review any of them, they're on the website. They will be looking at an overview of the GSP at this next meeting, providing feedback, and then also helping us to providing feedback to us on outreach for the public workshop. So some better ideas on how to get the word out and how to get the most attendance that we can possible to really, get into some of these areas and communities that may not even know what Sigma or a GSP is. And with that, I'll open it up to any other management committee members if they have any updates.
Is it going okay? Seems like everybody's getting along pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important.
Yeah, the advisory committee are all very engaged. The advisory committee seems to all be very engaged and interested in what they have going on, and not just expecting the status quo, but really trying to find collaborative solutions.
Oh, good. Great report there. Thank you. Now we'll take public comment on any matter not on the agenda. We can't take action today. Are you here just to watch, or you want to speak? Is he? See what I know? Okay, so we're adjourned. We'll see you September. Let me get my glasses on. Don't tell me anybody. 23rd. Good meeting. Get out of here in an hour.
Almost.
You guys making motions in seconds.
All right, yeah, we're just too slow.